Transport, Mrs. Barbara Castle, listening to those results going through Robin Day.
Mrs. Castle, what particularly makes you so cheerful this morning?
Well, my own result and the results nationally.
What do you think was the main reason for the national result as it appears to be?
I think there's no doubt that people feel that in the last 17 months we've taken a grip on the economic situation, and we've done it at the same time as we've made big strides forward towards a more socially just society.
Do you think that the prospect of a larger, much larger Labour majority means much more trouble from certain elements in the party? For instance, the left wing on issues like Vietnam and things like that.
I wouldn't bank on trouble if I were you, Robin.
I'm not banking on anything. I'm just asking you a question. I thought you might be able to give me the answer.
I think that the important thing from the point of view of the left wing or any section of the party is that they should feel there is some advance, some activity in the directions that we all want in the Labour movement. It's inactivity that makes for dissension and unhappiness.
Do you think that the question of Britain's entry into the common market would be one matter on which there might be, I'm not suggesting rebellion, but at least considerable argument and feeling in a large majority?
Yes, I think there will be a lot of argument about it. And quite rightly, it's a subject that ought to be argued about. And I'm very interested to see that not only do George Brown and I, for instance, stress the same things about the common market, the need to have the right conditions on which to go in, but I see that Mr. Heath was a last-minute convert to the need for going in on conditions. He was horrified in his assurances to the National Farmers Union that he never thought of going in unconditionally. So you see, we're all agreed about it.
Do you think, perhaps Mr. Heath will be able to deal with that one later at some stage, but do you think the campaign made any difference?
The campaign made any difference?
Yes,
very little.
Yes.
No, I felt from the very beginning that this, in a sense, was a rather unreal election, because one felt from the outset that people had made up their minds. And any of the issues that were raised by the opposition during the campaign really had only a very marginal effect. People had profoundly decided before the campaign began, and I think whether we polled after 3 days or 3 weeks, it wouldn't have made much difference.
Well, let us thank God it's not 3 months, anyway.
Yes, same here.
Goodbye, Mrs. Castle.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mrs. Barbara Castle was talking from our studio in Manchester. But now let's go up and take a look at the state of the parties board.
Well, here we are with 423 results in, about 37 more to come tonight. Labour holding 282, should go comfortably over 300, not quite reaching the 316 necessary to be absolutely certain on the night. But with all the evidence we've got, those gains of 37 will grow and grow to ensure at least 100 majority for Labour and rather more. The position then, the Conservatives have been able to make absolutely no gains whatever in seats and have lost 38. Then turning to the party lead position, we're now just at coming up 140, and that's what Labour's got, 146 in the way of a lead over the Conservatives, bigger than they're likely to be able to hold as we get the remaining results in tonight and in particular tomorrow. That'll probably shrink down a bit, but nonetheless it'll be certainly 100-plus majority on present form.
And the results are beginning to come in again now from Scotland, Ian.
Glasgow Springburn, Richard Buchanan holds this seat. Labour's had it ever since 1945. It's a railway workshop seat. Dundee West.
2.5% swing there.
Peter Doig up against the Liberal for the first time since 51.
The Liberal only got half, needed to save a deposit. There's a 3.9%
Twickenham,
swing there.
Gresham Cook. This is always holds it for the Conservatives. They normally get a majority of over 12,000. It's down.
4% swing there.
Motherwell, George Lawson holds it for Labour. He's a government whip.
2% swing there.
And Hamilton, another safe Labour seat, and that's Tom Fraser, who was Minister of Transport for the first 15 months or so of the Labour government, but gave way to Barbara Castle.
Hardly any swing there. 0.2% swing to Labour, one of the least good results for Labour so far tonight.
Now, Chigwell, and this is a seat which Labour on this swing might just have won, but John Biggs-Davison, who's a right-wing member of the Conservative Party, has held it quite comfortably. Oldham East, which Labour gained in 1959 against the then flow to the Conservatives, which they've now held quite comfortably.
2.8% swing to Labour.
St Albans, Victor Goodhue has held this seat off Keith Kyle, who's the new Labour candidate.
It was a Labour seat in 45. Labour certainly hasn't been winning back all the seats they were winning in 45.
Then Chester, John Temple, great expert on the rating system, holds this seat, but with a reduced majority. Finchley, Mrs. Margaret Thatcher, front bench spokesman for the Conservative Party.
Labour get back second place there from the Liberals, who used to regard this as their best seat in London.
The Liberal candidate John Pardo is fighting elsewhere, Paisley. And this is obviously fairly safe Labour territory. The Conservatives get back into second place here too because Johnny Bannerman is no longer fighting for the Liberals.
The Liberal vote, fully halved there in Paisley.
So that was John Bannerman. Spelthorne, Sir Beresford Craddock, knows it for the Conservatives.
3% swing to Labour there.
He's been there ever since 1950.
He only got in by 31 votes, so he's strengthened his position in a time when the Conservatives have been losing ground.
Belfast South, and this is a good, solid Ulster Unionist territory. Mr. Pounder holds on.
But a very impressive swing to Labour there, 8.3% swing to Labour in Belfast South.
Somerset North, this was a possible Labour win, only the 3.3% swing, but Paul Deans held on to it. He's a former Conservative Research Department man.
Only 1.5% swing there in Somerset North.
London Brixton and Colonel Marcus Lipton, who's been here for over 30 years, holds on with an increased majority.
3.2% swing there. Only 57% of people voted there.
Kidderminster and Sir Tatham Brinton holds on to the seat that he inherited from Sir Gerald Nabarro in 64. Sir Gerald himself is now standing elsewhere.
3.7% swing there.
Belfast East, Stanley McMaster.
Another big swing in Northern Ireland, 6% swing to Labour in Belfast East.
Sowerby and Douglas Houghton, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, who's in charge of the government's general overall social service planning, holds the seat. Brierley Hill, which the Conservatives might have lost to this swing, but John Talbot's hung on to it against the very formidable Dr. Catherine Rogers.
Only 2.2% swing there.
I'll interrupt, drop the grapes, and here comes Cardiff North. Cardiff North gained by Labour.
Yes, well,
You were saying?
on the swing, this should have gone. It's one of these which is just on the turn, isn't it?
It looks to me very much as though Labour may win Barry, and that will leave the Conservatives only with Denbigh with Denbigh and with Flint West as the only two Conservative seats in Wales. They don't have any seats in South Wales.
So this is assuming that I must be careful. I'm never quite sure whether we count Monmouth in Wales or not, but it's almost certainly, I think, gone. Anyway, let's carry on. Coventry North, Maurice Edelman holds the seat.
5.4% swing to Labour in Coventry North.
With an increased majority.
The West Midlands are plainly making up for the slow swing in the previous election.
Oswestry, John Biffin, who won this at a by-election some years ago, holds it, but with a fallen majority. Nottingham West, Michael English, who won this seat off Peter Tapsell at the last election with 2,000 majority. He's bumped it up quite a lot.
5.5% swing there to Labour.
Heston and Isleworth, this is another one which Labour might have won, but Mr. Reader Harris, who's held it for 16 years now, he's hung on to it.
3% swing to Labour in Heston and Isleworth.
Another minister back, Dick Maben, Ericsson Maben, Under Secretary of the Scottish Office, and he's bumped up his majority a little.
The Liberals are second there.
But with a low vote. Swindon, Francis Noel Baker. He's there. His majority is up a little. Swindon, the railway town. Sheffield Hillsborough, and another member of the government back, George Darling, Minister of State of the Board of Trade. He sat for Hillsborough for 16 years now. And Glasgow Gorbals, Mrs. Alice Cullen, who has represented this constituency for nearly 20 years, 18 years.
Hardly any swing there, less than 1%.
And here comes, I think, another headline. Jim Callaghan is back down in Wales. I don't think that will surprise you, will it?
Not at all. There's Cardiff South East. It was a seat which looked quite marginal after the 59 election, but in 64, when he was up against Ted Dexter, he piled up a huge majority. Now Birmingham Northfield. Donald Chapman holds the seat for Labour with a greatly increased majority.
6% swing to Labour in Birmingham
A lot
Northfield.
of car workers in this constituency.
Whilst we're on Birmingham Northfield, let's go across to our Midland desk because Michael Barrett has got a word.
Well, of course, it's roses all the way in the Midlands. As you can see, at passing glance at the map behind me, the black country is looking blacker than ever. These black circles, I'd remind you again, are Labour-held seats, and you can see perhaps a couple of black triangles there, which are Labour gains. I'd have thought that one of the happiest results of the whole evening, we've said how happy Labour must be with Smethwick and Leighton down in the south, but West Bromwich was really a major surprise because many people predicted that Maurice Foley, the man who was responsible for immigrants' affairs, would even lose his seat. In fact, he won it with a 2.8 swing to Labour. It's bad news pretty well all over the place for the Liberals. The biggest blow of all, I think, was in Ladywood, where Wallace Lawler thought that he was going to win the seat. He didn't come within a mile of doing so. The bookies' odds against him, mind you, are 201, but it was said that this was perhaps the best long shot of the election. And all over the region, it seems that the Liberal vote is down by 4%, which again may be a grim prediction for the East Anglian results coming in tomorrow. The Conservatives, of course, have, in two cases, recorded a swing in their favour. One in Nuneaton, which one might say is a personal vote against Frank Cousins. Maybe he's still regarded as a carpetbagger by some. And in Belper with George Brown. Now, I've been talking to the Labour Party in Belper just a few minutes ago, and they say they don't really accept this as a swing against George Brown. They say that it's really due to the fact that many Derby commuters have come into the constituency since the last election.
Well, all our eyes went up onto the board to see a Liberal gain. Here comes the headline, Liberal gain.
Cheadle. Michael Winstanley has won Cheadle for the Liberal Party. Very good result for the Liberals. They came second last time, but they were 8,500 behind, nonetheless. And now they've spun this. One possible reason is this is one of these fast-growing constituencies on the fringe of the big urban areas. David.
In many ways, one doesn't always like stressing how uniformly the country behaves. It's very nice to find a constituency that behaves in an individual way. Here you have something going right against the trend of all the results so far. Mr. Winstanley's personal appeal must obviously have made a prodigious difference in the Cheadle constituency. The Northern Orpington, it was called by the Liberals, now at last lived up to its name.
I think originally we thought that was a Labour man may have got in there, didn't we, at Cheadle, when he came with Mr. Flash? We didn't. I've got it wrong. Harold Webb.
Well, this is a great win for the Liberals. The North now has a Liberal MP. In the last Parliament, out of 168 seats, it didn't have a single Liberal MP in Parliament. It lost the two at the last election. I think the full figures now for Cheadle are coming up. There you are, the Liberal majority, 655. Now, Cheadle is in fact the Northern Orpington. It's almost identical to Orpington. It's an outer suburb to Manchester, a sort of commuter centre, growing fast with owner-occupiers. And at the last election, it polled the highest Liberal vote of any constituency in Britain. I think the poll then was something like 25,000. Michael Winstanley, a television personality, a doctor, a cricketer, a man of some personality in the north of England, has now won this seat for the Liberals, and I'm sure there'll be cock-a-hoop in the north. Now, is this a good augury for the next Liberal cliffhanger result, which should be coming through pretty soon now? That's the Colne Valley, where the Liberals there are trying to wrest the seat from Labour. In this case, of course, in Cheadle, they won it from the Conservatives. Cliff?
We did get it right first time, I'm now informed by Ian, and I see waiting for us is Mr. Grimman. Robbie?
Ah, Mr. Grimman, what do you think of that one, Cheadle?
I think very well of it.
Has that cheered you up?
It has indeed. But Orpington cheered me up a great deal too.
Yes.
I think it does show that really first-rate candidates like Eric Lovett and Winstanley get their deserts, and this is extremely encouraging.
Even David Butler had to admit just now that the candidate can make some difference, which is encouraging.
I thought he made a very good point. I'm very sorry that Christopher Leighton, who's also an excellent candidate, just failed a triplet. But certainly it shows that where we put forward very good candidates, we have a great response from the electorate.
But the general picture, however, Mr. Grimman, does not appear to be good for the Liberals, does it? I've got a percentage here, 7.1% of the vote, as opposed to 10.2% at this time last time.
You're a marvel of percentages.
No, I'm just reading out what somebody else has given me. I hate
well,
the damn thing.
I rather thought that might be said.
Yes.
Because our mathematics is so good, and it's so good, it's not as good as all that. Well, I agree. Of course, we would like to do better. But we are very pleased indeed about these two results, because they're first-class people, and they show at least the electorate does respond to really good candidates.
What about the loss of Cardigan by Mr. Roderick Bowen?
I hadn't heard that it happened.
Well, that's just come in now. I hadn't heard it either.
Well, how do you know it's true?
Because somebody's given it to me on a piece of paper.
Well, I'm very sorry. Of course, we're sorry about losing any seat.
Yes.
But I do think we should emphasize on these two seats how satisfactory this is, and particularly to remember that the Evening Standard said we should lose Orpington by something like 10,000 votes.
Well, you mustn't believe what you read in the papers, Mr. Grimmett.
Indeed not.
May I ask you this? For many years now, Mr. Grimmett, you have been saying that the aim of the Liberal Party was to replace the Labour Party as the radical alternative to Toryism. What price that aim now?
We shall see what the Labour Party now do. My own belief is that this large Labour majority, which we all see coming up, is going to place the Labour Party in a very difficult position. I think it will mean that unless there is a large Liberal representation in the Commons, which there still may be, and we shall find the Labour Party going back to their most reactionary posture.
On the 3rd of January this year, Mr. Grimmett, you referring to the question of your possible retirement, you said, if, however, the next election produced a decisive majority, the matter might then be considered. Is it your intention to consider this now?
I'm not considering it tonight, no.
Not tonight?
No.
Mr. Grimmett, perhaps we'll hear from you later in the evening. Thank you very much indeed.
Yes, Mr. Grimmett, earlier in the morning, but now Trafalgar Square. I don't know whether they're celebrating or drowning their sorrows. Whatever it is, it looks extraordinarily uncomfortable. Now, you see, you really can't tell if that's a young man or a young lady with that great long hair, is it? Yeah, one's a man and one's a lady. That'll teach me better manners, won't it, in future? Oh, doesn't it? Don't you think that looks very uncomfortable, Ian?
It's not for me, yeah.
That's not for you. Somehow I didn't think it was. I don't think it's for me. People are applauding them down there, which is the most extraordinary thing. Anyway, now let's go across to the Scotland desk, Esmond Wright.
I think the first striking point where Scotland is concerned is, of course, that Scotland is now re-establishing its old tradition of political stability. A swing of only 1.5%, whereas the rest of the country is 3.5 to 4. We used to say that this was true of Scotland back in 1959. We began to have our doubts in the last 6 years. I think the second striking feature is, of course, the success of the Liberals, David Steele holding Roxburgh, Selkirk and Peebles. It's true his majority is severely cut, but they're still there, and as further confirmation of the success of liberalism in Scottish politics, a portent to what might well happen in the results tomorrow, is the fact that in the fight in Greenock against Dick Mabon, the Liberal Ian Will, who fought Kilmarnock 17 months ago, Ian Will came second in the poll. So the Liberals clearly are fighting even in the urban areas of Scotland, although one notes they put up no candidates in all 15 of Glasgow's constituencies. But if one looks at personalities, the man of the day in Scotland is Donald Dewar. Here one has to speak with caution. He's an old student of mine. He very properly read history at Glasgow University. He was President Union, Chairman of Labour Club, observer, debater. A formidable, a tower of strength he'll be in the backbenches as a debater in the House. His swing in South Aberdeen was 5.7. Now this is the strongest, the biggest swing in Scottish politics in 1966. He has defeated certainly the most attractive political grandmother in Scottish politics, Lady Tweedsmuir. It's very hard to believe that she is a grandmother, aged 50, and he certainly doesn't rival her in beauty. There have been other significant achievements, Teddy Taylor holding Cathcart, the Honourable George Younger holding Ayr. But essentially, out of 37 gains, only one gain in Scotland. So Scotland is once again a stable political area. Back to Cliff.
All right, now, and some more results.
From Scotland to Wales, Labour have gained confirmation.
It's Bristol.
No, from West Country. Bristol North East. Mr. Hopkins, who held his seat rather unexpectedly last time with a below-average swing against the Conservatives, possibly over the comprehensive school issue, but now Bristol North East has followed the way of Bristol North West.
It's 4% swing. People thought the aircraft issue might hurt the Labour Party there. This time it didn't.
Lowestoft, and the Conservatives have held this. Jim Pryor, who is Ted Heath's PBS, This is one that Labour might have captured, but Jim Pryor has held on to this one, although by a pretty narrow margin.
2.5% swing in the first rural seat from East Anglia that we've had, or from Norfolk and Suffolk, which may have some implications.
Right, now let's go to Wales. Cardiff North. This is a seat the Conservatives held even in 1945, but they've just been edged out of it. Donald Bott.
4.4% swing puts Barry very much on a cliff edge. The only remaining Conservative seat in South Wales, apart from Monmouth.
And the other side of Cardiff, Cardiff South East, the Chancellor of the Exchequer has held his seat with an increased majority.
3% swing to Labour there in Cardiff South East.
Colchester. This is another Conservative seat which might have gone on this swing. It's on the border. Anthony Buck has held it, but of course with a reduced majority.
2.5% swing in Colchester.
Another member of the government back. Newton, Fred Lee, the Minister of Power. Held this.
No swing there at all, absolutely the same as before.
Altrincham and Sale, Anthony Barber, who took over this seat at the by-election. He lost Doncaster at the last general election. He's held on to this one.
2.8% swing.
Slightly down on his by-election.
Plymouth
Devonport, and Joan Vickers has held this with a narrow majority, but we thought that when Plymouth Sutton went with a big majority, she might lose it.
3.6% swing there.
Sevenoaks, and this is good Conservative commuter territory, and John Rogers has held it.
3.4% swing in Sevenoaks.
Croydon Northwest, Frederick Harris has held this, but with a reduced majority.
Michael Stewart, another Michael Stewart, was defeated there.
This is the seat where there was some trouble about the Labour candidate. Ince. This is solid Labour territory. Michael Maguire, he holds this with an increased majority, not by much. Neath, another massive Labour majority. They always get 20,000 or upwards in that sort of constituency.
5.5% swing there.
Stirlingshire West, Mr. Baxter has held it for 7 years.
Dr. McIntyre, second.
Right, now let's catch our breath a bit. And let's have a summary. I think it's... Oh, there's a headline coming. A Liberal out.
Ah, that was what Robin Day was telling us about. Roderick Byrne has lost Cardiganshire. You remember that he was in the centre of the argument about the... That's that one. He's in the centre of the argument about the speakership, who should be the number 3, as it were, the Deputy Chairman of Ways and Means. He took it. Liberals, I think many Liberals were a little disappointed that he reduced their practical strength in the House of Commons to 9. Now he's lost his seat.
2 honourable parliamentary posts are now vacant, the Deputy Speaker and the Deputy Chairman of Ways and Means. Only Mr. Horace King, the Speaker, survives of the 3 permanent officers of the House.
And Liverpool, let's go now to Liverpool, and here is the Prime Minister arriving at 2 o'clock in the morning at the Adelphi. Ah, we've lost his picture. Oh, we've lost his picture. As soon as we get it back, we shall go back to it. It's all flashing up. Anyway, even though we can't see him, I'm sure he's going to sleep very well indeed tonight.
Can I quickly squeeze in the news? The Liberals have gained Colne Valley, the second Liberal gain tonight. This is really quite a night for the Liberals. They've gained it off Labour.
Colne Valley. Let's go back now to
Labour defeat. Now that's how it was.
Let's go back. There's Harold Wilson. I can see there's the Prime Minister. Dark picture indeed, but after all, it is 2 o'clock in the morning, and it does have to go up underneath that great ramp at that hotel. The all fluttering away there. A very happy man, I should think he is tonight. And now, here's
the Colne Valley result, and Mr. Wainwright, who's been knocking on the door, has now pushed out Patrick Duffy, the former Labour MP.
The Conservative loses his deposit, and plainly the Conservatives decided they'd rather have a Liberal than a Labour member in.
We are seeing a lot of this tonight, this polarisation between two.
And let's go back now to Liverpool. There is the Prime Minister stepping out.
Just at the back of you, sir.
I don't want to turn my back on our friendship.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, Labour, a few minutes ago, we see, had 293 seats, 293 seats. Does this put you in a position to claim victory at this time?
I've already had an interview with television tonight, BBC and ITN. I haven't anything to add to what I said then.
Which was?
I would wait until there was an absolute majority for any party in the House.
Mr. Ducan said earlier that he didn't feel the position was hopeless, sir. Have you any comment on that?
It's a free country. He can say what he likes.
What are your plans now, sir?
To go to bed. Go to bed and catch some sleep.
And tomorrow?
To go back to London.
Fine. Thank you very much, sir. How are you feeling just at this moment?
Perfectly fit, but a bit short of sleep.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I must say, we'll let Mr. Wilson get some sleep. Tomorrow, we shall certainly be following him on his way down to London, and we shall certainly, at that time, be talking to him. We sincerely hope, whether he comes by air or by train. Now, poor old Bob McKenzie over there has been sitting patiently for so long.
Well, although Mr. Wilson quite properly doesn't yet claim victory until he gets his 316, one over the odds to be sure he's got it, nonetheless, the fact is that as much as 2 hours ago, Mr. Heath conceded defeat, in effect, by talking in terms of what went wrong or went right with the campaign and what his strategy would be now in opposition. So for 2 hours, the main opposition party has, in effect, been granting defeat. I was reminded very much of 1959. Remember then that Hugh Gateskill, in the opposite position, did very much this at something like the same time. He acknowledged he couldn't win against the tide that was then sweeping him out. And indeed, the parallel with 1959 in reverse is very striking. It looks now very much as if Labour's majority will be quite similar to Mr. McMillan's majority in 1959, 100 plus. His was an even 100. Labour probably will be a little over that, depending on how things go in the seats that come in tomorrow. It's much too early yet to begin talking about why it went the way it did, but I would like just to leave with you one thought in particular. One of the opinion polls asked the public, who do you blame for Britain's present economic difficulties? Now, the public replied, Labour 16%, Conservative 42%, both 30%. There it was, a year and a half of Labour in power. The public was acknowledging that you could not blame them as much for the difficulties of the country as you could blame the Conservatives after 13 years in power before that. Now, I'm not saying whether the public's right about that, but the fact is that Labour clearly was being given a chance to see what it could do. Mr. Wilson claimed earlier tonight they like our pragmatic methods, they like the smack of good and firm government. And quite clearly, he wasn't claiming it as a great socialist, overwhelming change in the country, but rather a victory for sound government, as he would put it. And there they've got their biggest opportunity. This is the second time, really the first time in Labour's history, they've ever increased their strength 2 elections running. This is then a free run for Labour for 5 years, if they want that, or 4 years, and they'll now have a chance to prove what they can do in the policies they've now launched upon in the last 18 months.
Well, there's the situation. Summary from Robert McKenzie. We now have 442 results in. Let's have a few more of them, Ian, some of those that we haven't had so far.
Yes, let's have Goole, which Labour's held ever since the war, and George Jager has put up his majority.
3% swing there.
Huddersfield East, Bill Malloy, who was number 2 at the Navy Department of the Ministry of Defence, then took over the number 1 job when Christopher Mayhew resigned.
3.5% swing to Labour there. Liberals keep their deposit, 16%.
Tiverton, which the Conservatives have held for very many years, Robin Maxwell Hislop, but his majority, in fact, is up.
Labour gets back to second place from the Liberals. It was a second, third place fight.
Stepney, Peter Shaw, one of the Prime Minister's parliamentary private secretaries, and one of the main architects of Labour policy in the years in opposition.
50.7 voted. That's the lowest percentage turnout we've yet had.
Now we've got a rush result from Renfrewshire West. This is a seat which Labour, Norman Buchan, won for Labour in '64. If the swing had gone the other way, it would have been marginal, but it's not now.
Slightly bigger than average swing for Scotland in West Renfrew.
Feltham. And this is interesting. Russell Kerr becomes the new Labour MP. His wife, Anne Kerr, is the MP for Rochester and Chatham, husband and wife, both in the House.
Two Dunwoodies. Oh, well, we still wait for the Falmouth and Campbell result.
Well, that may come up. Lewisham South, Carol Johnson has Herbert Morrison's old seat. Carol Johnson holds it for Labour. And I think it's Bedwellty. It's a very solid Labour seat, and Mr. Finch who is the Undersecretary at the Welsh Office, Parliamentary Secretary at the Welsh Office, holds it pretty comfortably.
Five-bed Wexty.
I don't know. Wells, Lynch Maiden. Lieutenant Commander Lynch Maiden holds it for the Conservatives with a slightly reduced majority. This is in East Somerset. Mainly
Biggest
farming
Liberal
area.
vote. They're still down on last time. 2.1% swing to Labour.
Another Glasgow result, Glasgow Proven.
2.2% swing in Proven.
And Portsmouth Langston held for the Conservatives. Another of these huge constituencies, which will greatly 96,000, is going to have to be chopped up in the redistributions coming over the next few years.
Only 1.4% swing there. Low swing in Portsmouth all through.
And Glasgow Govan, John Rankin, who's been a member for one of the Glasgow seats for over 20 years, holds it very comfortably.
2.7 swing.
On that result, let's now hear from the Secretary of State for Scotland, Willie Ross, Robin Day.
Mr. Ross, thank you for waiting. Why do you think there has been such a low swing, if any, in Scotland towards the Labour Party as compared with the rest of the kingdom?
Oh, well, I think the rest of the kingdom are now catching up with Scotland. We made our big swing at the last election.
And does that account for your own seat as well, where you've got a 0.7 swing to yourself, as against much more in the rest of the country?
Oh, yes, I think so.
There has been another suggestion put about this, that Scottish people perhaps are not satisfied with the attitude of the Labour Party towards the regional feeling, the national feeling of Scotland.
No, I think this would be a misconception indeed. There is a traditional party loyalty in Scotland. We used to say that a majority of 2,000 was a safe seat. And we've never been subject to the dramatic swings that you have south of the border.
That is what Mr. Esmond Wright means when he says Scotland's reputation for stability has been upheld.
Well, what gratifies me is that we've stabilized at a very, very high position, and indeed we've made this dramatic gain in South Aberdeen. And remember, there are still possibilities of further gains in Scotland.
The Labour Party doesn't feel that perhaps more interest in some form of Scottish self-government would further its cause in Scotland?
Not really. We're too politically mature for that one.
Mr. Ross, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Esmond Wright smiles across his grateful thanks for the kind words from the Secretary of State for Scotland, I may say. All right, now we've got some more results here.
Let's first of all take Ealing South. And Brian Batsford, the Deputy Conservative Chief Whip, holds the seat with a decreased majority.
3.5% swing to Labour, very low Liberal vote.
Shipley, which might have gone, Geoffrey Hurst holds it with a reduced majority, but he holds it. This is Woollen territory.
Only 2.5% swing there, very high turnout, 87% of people voting.
Chelmsford, Norman St. John Stevens holds this with a reduced majority, but he holds it quite comfortably.
Only 2% swing there.
One of the extreme left-wingers. Manchester Withington, Sir Robert Carey holds it, but with a greatly decreased majority.
Conservatives keep their 2 seats in Manchester, but very much less majority, both of them.
Another one from Northern Ireland, Belfast North. Young Mr. Stratton Mills holds the seat.
Big swing there, 5%. All the 3 Belfast seats that had Unionist Labour fights have all shown a big swing to Labour.
Stockton-on-Tees, another minister holding a seat, Bill Rogers, Under Secretary of Economic Affairs, puts up his majority a bit. Remember this, before the war was the Harold Macmillan seat. And here's the Cardiganshire result. Roderick Bowen losing the seat, the Liberal loss.
This seat's been held by the Liberals for 60 years or so, I believe.
Mr. Daffyd Morgan is a solicitor and now becomes the new Labour MP for Cardiganshire. Manchester Wythenshawe, Alfred Morris. This is a seat which Labour gained in 1964. They've really been pumping up this majority.
4.4% swing.
Gravesend, another seat they gained in 64, and the majority is up there too.
3.3% swing.
Surbiton, this is solid Conservative commuter territory, and Nigel Fisher has held it.
2.7% swing there.
Harold Macmillan's old seat since the war, Bromley. John Hunt holds it, and with a substantial majority. This is another seat, incidentally, which is going to change with redistribution.
Only 1.8% swing there.
Greenwich, Knowledge Minister, holds a seat. Dick Marsh, Parliamentary Secretary, Minister of Technology, one of the definitely up-and-coming junior ministers.
2.3% swing.
Willesden West, Lawrence Pavitt, PPS to Michael Stewart, holds the seat with an increased majority.
Big swing there, nearly 6%.
Big West Indian population there. Croydon North East, this is one that might have gone, but Mr. Bernard Wetherill has held it. He became the MP for this constituency.
Almost 4% swing there.
Carnarvon, Gronwy Roberts, the Minister of State for the Welsh office. He puts the majority up a little.
Only 2% swing there to Labour. Welsh Nationalists gets a big vote.
Cliff. And now let's have a word from our Northern desk from Harold Webb. Harold?
Well, it's about the Colne Valley, Cliff. The Colne Valley has a knack of getting into the political headlines. In the old days, of course, it was a great hotbed of radicalism. Philip Snowden and Victor Grayson were brought up there. But although the Colne Valley win for the Liberals, which is going to make them cock a hoop in the north tonight, was always on, just as so was the one in Cheadle, to some extent they have gone against the national swing. They are, in fact, out of character with the regional swing. But the reason for this, I think, is because the Liberals in the north have concentrated in this election on putting in a great deal of activity into these two winnable seats. The result is they've won back Cheadle, which is the North's Orpington, as I've said, and they've won back the Colne Valley. And the North now has two Liberal members of Parliament for the first time for 18 months. Cliff?
And the state of the party's board is where we're going to, not me, really.
Yep. Yes, here we are now, 296 Labour. It's not likely Labour tonight will get its 316. It will go over the 300 mark, but we've just got about 14 more seats to come, and obviously, therefore, they won't get up to 316. The Conservatives haven't drawn blood at all. You'll notice no gains whatever. Rather unusual position, really, because ordinarily there's at least some lurch to the party that's on the losing side, but nowhere enough to give the Conservatives a single gain. Labour position, very interesting now. They've got 5. Remember, they gained 2, that is Cheadle and Colne Valley, and lost 1, Cardigan. Their net position, therefore, really, Liberal position is therefore up by 1 on the present form. And the others include the Speaker and a Republican Labour win in Northern Ireland. So therefore, the party lead position at 213. Labour's lead is 153, considerably more than it will be when the whole thing is over tomorrow. It now looks as if Labour's lead will be hovering around the 100 mark, could be just over, could be under, when all the results are in finally tomorrow. We've got, you see, 184 to come, of which about 14 are tonight. Cliff.
All right, let's catch up now on some of those results that you haven't had.
Leicester North West, Sir Barnet Janner, this is another of the Leicester seats, put his majority up. Barnet's held it ever since the war.
5% swing, slightly above the Leicester average.
South Shields, Arthur Blenkinsop holds it. This has been a Labour seat for over 30 years.
Only 2% swing there.
East Ham South, Albert Oram holds the seat.
4% swing there.
Junior Minister at the Department of Overseas Development. Carlisle, this is the seat that Ronald Lewis won at the last election, and he's held it with an increased majority.
I thought the split in the Conservatives might switch that back, but it's had a 3.5% swing, just about the average.
Lee in Lancashire, Harold Boardman, who has held this seat for 21 years, ever since the war, and he's pushed his majority up a little.
1.2% swing in that safe seat.
Tottenham, which we were talking about a little earlier on, Norman Atkinson has held this for Labour with an increased majority.
4% swing.
Another Glasgow seat, Glasgow Craigton, Bruce Millen, who is Under-Secretary of Defence for the RAF.
4.2% swing, well above the Glasgow average of 2.6, the lowest in any big city.
And then the one safe Conservative seat in Bristol, Bristol West, Robin Cook holds this. His majority is down a little.
2.5% swing, just below the average, 3%.
This is the Clifton area of Bristol, and now another minister back, Leeds West, Charlie Pannell, Minister of Public Building and Works, and he's pushed his majority up.
4.1% swing, just the average for Leeds.
Well, there was a very nice moment just now when Harold Webb used the phrase hot bit of radicalism. I suddenly saw Michael Foote up there waiting to talk with Robin Day. Robin?
Morning, Michael. Thank you. Can you hear me all right? Thank you for going to Abergavenny for us. How is it that you got a swing in your constituency towards Labour of only 1.05 compared to a general swing of 3.5 about?
Well, when there's not much more of the bottom of the barrel to scrape, you can't get much further deeper, can you? And that was the situation of the Tories. So, but that is not significant, you know. We've done very well. We've increased our position in Ebervale, and we had a very difficult to build on the top of our pyramid.
Do you think the campaign, all the arguing and the television and the speeches, do you think it made any difference?
Yes, I think so. I think this is a great historic victory, and it shouldn't be smudged and written down in any way. I think it's been a fine election. I think a much better election than all the newspapers have said. There's been a great argument going on, and in fact, the Labour Party has won the victory, which many people expected and which the Labour Party and the Labour movement deserved in October 1964. There are also some marvellous victories amongst these, you know. Smethwick is a great thing, isn't it? And Cardiff North, that'll give great rejoicing all over the country. The only one I'm very sorry about is Devonport. They came very near to it. But some great victories for British common sense and decency, like Smethwick, as I say, and Eton and Slough, that's another wonderful victory, isn't it? So the whole thing is extremely satisfactory. It's very difficult for me to say anything that's not just exploding with satisfaction, because many of us on the left of the party have been advocating for months that we should have this election, and we're so glad to see it turned out so well for everybody in the whole country.
When you say it's been a great argument, this is in a sense paying a tribute to your opponents for having raised issues which made a great argument possible.
Not at all. No, we were raising these issues before they ever got onto it. Our opponents started the election by promising bribes of 800 million and finished up the election by saying the country was bankrupt and nobody could understand what they were saying.
What do you think
that's part of the reason why they're down the drain.
What do you think will be the effect of a large Labour majority? Do you think it will make the left and you and your friends be a little more restive on certain issues on which you feel strongly?
There's been a great swing to the left in the country, hasn't there? I can't write that off, can you, Robin? I'm sure you wouldn't want to.
Well, I don't want to write anything off
no,
or
I'm
on.
sure, I know. This computer fellow is the commentator I like so much. You know, I think he's got a great future in front of him. I think he's doing very well indeed.
No, but I must ask you whether you think there'll be more left-wing people in the House of Commons.
Yes, indeed, I think, yes. I think that's the way the country's going generally.
Do you think they'll be quieter or less quiet than they were in the last...
Well, I think the inclination of left-wing people is to get slightly noisier and satisfactorily noisier as we go along, and for the benefit of all concerned.
Do you expect a seat in the government when it's reconstructed, Mr. Foote?
No, I should think that's very unlikely, but I've got plenty of satisfaction without it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Foote. I'm going to hand over now to Alan Williams, who's with you there in Abergavenny to find out some opinions of people there.
Well, we've been having a party here, but we've been driven a little bit into the corner, very happily, because Mr. Foote arrived from Ebbw Vale. Now, here, of course, the result will be declared about 1 o'clock tomorrow. We're hoping you may be with us for the declaration. Conservative in Monmouth since 1918. And Mr. Thornycroft's majority in 1964, 714, but a Liberal stood then, and he polled nearly 7,000 votes. Now, there's no Liberal this time, and I know that some of these men here have Liberal inclinations. What's going to happen to the Liberal vote this time?
Well, on the whole, our canvassers felt we'd taken predominantly Labour votes last time, and must assume that they will revert to their previous voting habits. And I should think Labour has a very fair chance in Monmouth. Against this, the poll seems to be down this time, particularly in the urban areas, and there's still a chance that the Labour have failed to get out their vote, and Thornycroft may still be in, I think.
Well, now, it has been said earlier that, of course, the rural areas may come back to the more conservative line of thinking. Do you think this might be true here tomorrow?
No, my own opinion is that I think the Labour Party will undoubtedly get in 2,000 in Monmouth.
And what's happened to the Liberal vote?
The Liberal vote, I think, quite a lot have abstained. They've split evenly. I think the new voters in the constituency will have made the difference.
Well, where do they come from?
Well, they've come mainly, I think, from the valleys in connection with Spencer Works at Newport.
Well, there it is then. And how do you think it's going to go tomorrow?
I agree entirely that there will be a considerable Labour majority, probably something in the region of 2,000, I would say.
Well, maybe you'll be with us tomorrow when it's declared at 1 o'clock. But in the meantime, Alan Williams here at Abergavenny.
Let's stay and take a look now at that big screen where we will hear, I hope, in just a moment from that computer fellow, which really intrigues Michael Foote so much. And if Michael Foote is still watching down there, perhaps he'll cast his eye upon this, which will give him some idea of the likely Labour majority. Time, 2:15. Result, majority, 105. 105.
Right, let's have the result from Worcestershire South, and this brings Sir Gerald Mabarra back to the House. Remember that he had to resign from Kidderminster through ill health before the last election, but he's perked up. He's held Worcestershire South for the Conservatives, actually put up the Tory vote, David.
Yes, I haven't got the figures in detail here yet, but it does seem to be rather a good result.
Nottingham North, William Whitlock, who is a government whip. He's held this fairly safe Labour seat, always fairly safe, and he's got a good majority this time.
3% swing to Labour in Nottingham North.
Bristol South, Will Wilkins, who has held this seat ever since 1945, put up his majority.
3.5% swing to Labour there.
Edinburgh West, Mr. Stoddart has held it for the Conservatives. He's a former junior minister at the Scottish office for the Conservative Party, but his majority is down.
3% swing there. That must threaten Edinburgh Pentland, which we haven't yet heard from.
Liverpool Garston. There's a new MP here. The former Conservative member stood down. Mr. Trevor Fortescue has held it with a reduced majority.
Only 2.3% swing. The Conservatives keep their 2 seats in Liverpool despite the swing against them.
Leeds South and Merlin Rees holds Hugh Gaitskill's old seat. And Merlin Rees has just recently got a job in the government as Under Secretary for the Army. So all 4 Labour MPs in Leeds are now all in the government.
5.5% swing there, just above the Leeds average of 4%.
Barrow-in-Furness and another new member, Walter Monslow, stood down. This is obviously a safe Labour seat. And Albert Booth, who's a draftsman, takes over as the MP.
And a 5% swing.
Aberdeen North and Hector Hughes, the very prominent figure at Question Time on Scottish matters, holds it at the age of 79. He's carrying on.
A swing of almost 5%.
Tynemouth, Dame Irene Ward, another very prominent figure at Question Time. She holds Tynemouth.
3.4% swing. Some people talked of that as a possible change. I don't think it ever was.
No, she hung on to that one. Then Edinburgh South. Liberals stood here last time, didn't this time. Michael Carr-Cutchinson has held this seat for getting up to 10 years, 9 years.
2.9% swing.
Loughborough. This has been Labour ever since the war, normally fairly safe, and John Cronin's held it.
Only 2% swing.
Another member of the government, East Ham North, Reg Prentice, Parliamentary Secretary, Education and Science.
5.5% swing.
And then Conservative Seaside Territory, Weston-super-Mare, David Webster. He's now Van Bent spokesman. He holds the seat. Midlothian. And this is a seat which Edie holds for Labour, quite comfortably.
Now, the results are easing up a bit now. We've brought you a great many of them. Let's take a look at the state of the parties.
Labour, then, with 297, needs just 19 more seats in order to be home and dry with the 316 necessary to form a government. There only are 10 more to come tonight. They'll hardly, therefore, get over that hump on these figures. The Conservatives, 41 losses, not a single gain. This is, to me, rather surprising because ordinarily you get the odd movement of a seat or so against the tide. They couldn't manage it at all. Liberals have 5, a net gain of 1 on the seats that were contested tonight. Others 2, Speaker, and 1 Republican Labour in Northern Ireland. So the party lead, as we come up to 223, the party lead board now shows the position as follows. Turning the party lead board at 223. Labour has this lead over the Conservatives alone of 151. That is almost certainly more than the final Labour majority. We're expecting a Labour majority of just around 100, give or take 10 seats when all is over. You'll notice that there are, we said 460 tonight, 450 have come in, and 170, therefore, will be reported tomorrow, approximately.
A comment, David?
Well, 2 points from the analysis. One, it does genuinely seem that there's evidence that the Conservatives to some extent stayed home. The lower the turnout, the greater the swing to Labour. Where the turnout held up, then the swing to the Labour was rather less. What about the future of the Liberals and the results they get tomorrow? Well, the swing against the Liberals in North Devon, where Jeremy Thorpe's majority was cut, they're dropping to 3rd place in Tiverton and in Torquay, does suggest possibly Peter Bessel's seat is in danger. So it may be that the personality factor, which we've seen exemplified in the Liberal gains in Cheadle and in Colne Valley, will pull off Peter Bessel's seat, and it might even lead to Liberal gains in the 2 or 3 other seats there. We haven't really got much evidence about the result in the north of Scotland. And if our final predictions about the overall Labour majority are a little uncertain, it is because we really do lack evidence about what will happen to the Liberals. Last time, you remember, they made their main gains in the north of Scotland right at the very end, 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. So we'll have to wait and see for the final Liberal figure. But while they've done badly in terms of votes in the seats where they had little hope, in the seats where they were doing well over the country as a whole, they haven't done so badly, and I should be very surprised if they don't go back to the next Parliament with a slight increase in representation.
Well, this calls, I think, for a comment from our Welsh desk. Kenneth Morgan?
Well, Michael Foot's satisfaction a short while ago is very understandable because Wales, as usual, has proved a graveyard for the hopes of the Conservative Party. Already they've lost 5 deposits in Wales, and there may be more to come. But the most striking feature, quite clearly, of the results in Wales is that 3 seats have changed hands: Cardiganshire, Conway and Cardiff North. This means that the Labour Party looks like having 31, possibly 32 even, of the 36 seats in Wales. Cardiganshire is very striking. This is a political revolution in the history of this country. The Liberals have held it ever since 1880. The Labour Party has now won it for the first time. Mr. Roderick Bowen here, I should imagine, was very sorely handed. In fact, as Deputy Chairman of Ways and Means, he was rather removed from the party controversy. It would seem from the figures we have in Cardiganshire that the Labour Party increased its poll not only at the expense of the Liberal Party, but also took votes from Plaid Cymru, the Welsh Nationalist Party. Then there's Cardiff North, a suburban seat, of course, in South Wales, a seat here which the Labour Party gained from the Conservatives, holding this seat for the first time. There was a swing of 4.4% to Labour. Would suggest here that leasehold reform was a major issue in the politics of Cardiff North. There was a major swing to Labour also in a seat they already held in Swansea West. And this might be a pointer perhaps to Barry, one of the few seats who've come from Wales again tonight, which possibly the Labour Party might also capture on this form. There's a new member in Cardiff North, by the way, Mr. Rowlands, a 26-year-old college lecturer, and he's unseated Donald Box, who, as Michael Foot pointed out a short while ago, has been very unpopular with trade unionists. The other seat Labour have won in Wales, Conway. A considerable swing here, a swing of 5.5% to Labour at the expense of Peter Thomas, who is one of the more able young Conservative members. Wales, therefore, again, a very strong territory for the Labour Party as a result of the 1966 general election.
Of course, there are some results to come from Wales tomorrow morning, but now let's catch up with some more of the results that have been coming in tonight.
Let's take Jarrow, Ernest Fernyhough, one of the Prime Minister's PPSs. This obviously is their Labour seat for many years. Bournemouth East and Christchurch, another Conservative seaside constituency.
2.3% swing to Labour, even in Bournemouth. Liberal drop in the vote, nearly 4%.
Nottingham Central, Jack Dunnett holds it. He won it off the Conservatives in '64. Rochdale.
A big swing, yeah.
Jack McCann holds it. You remember
the Conservatives get back second place there. From the seat that was a Conservative seat till the by-election in '57, went sour on them then, and they were badly in third place. They pulled up to second place.
Aberavon and John Morris, who was Parliamentary Secretary of the Ministry of Transport, but this holds this very safe Labour seat. Cardiff West and George Thomas, one of the most popular men in the House of Commons, Under-Secretary at the Home Office. Very puritanical, but with a great sense of humour.
Only 1.8% swing there. That lowers the average swing there and makes Barry more doubtful.
Renfrewshire East, and Miss Harvey Anderson holds the seat for the Conservatives. Wembley North, Eric Bullis holds this London suburb for the Conservatives. Edinburgh Leith, James Hoy, Junior Minister, holds it for Labour. Bristol Central, Arthur Palmer, who used to be the ex-member right for Cleveland, holds this for Labour.
And now there's a headline coming up, I'm told, a Labour gain, and it's Berwick. Berwick and East Lothian is gained for Labour.
This means that this was almost certain to go, because it needed only a very tiny movement to Labour for it to be lost to the Conservatives. It means that the Conservatives lose Sir William, and there's the full result. Sir William Anstruther Gray is beaten on the border country. He is was in the last Parliament the chairman of the 1922 committee, and among other things, one of his constituents is Sir Alec Douglas Hume.
And the victor is a professor of political science who has written the standard work on the working of the British cabinet. You'll get closer to his raw material now.
Well, there you are. I can see John Tidmarsh down in Smith Square, this time outside the Conservative Party headquarters. I hope that's not significant, John Tidmarsh, that they put you outside.
Tory headquarters. Inside, a sad and doleful scene. Many of the party workers going home. They might just as well pull the blinds and go into full mourning. But this is the situation at the moment. Mr. Heath, as far as I know, is still in his house in the Albany, in his flat in the Albany, and he has gone to bed. There is no question of him coming down here tonight and making a concession speech. The party chairman, Mr. Edward Buchan, is still in the building, but he too is going home and going to bed so that he can go down to his constituency Taunton tomorrow for the count. There is no question of him coming down and making a concession speech. But as far as Conservative headquarters is concerned, and all the party workers, even the Loyalist party workers, no one really has any doubts that it's all over and that Labour will be the government for the next 5 years or so. John Tidmarsh at Conservative headquarters.
Thank you very much indeed. It might be all over for them, but I assure you it's not all over for us because we've still got some results we haven't given you yet. Off we go.
London, Islington, Southwest. Albert Evans, this has been Labour ever since the war, and he's held it with an increased majority.
3% swing, 6% of the vote shared between those independents.
North Fylde, this is a new MP. Richard Stanley has retired, and Mr. Walter Clegg, who's a solicitor, becomes the new Conservative MP for North Fylde.
4% swing.
Blythe, Edward Milne holds this very safe north-east Labour seat. Used to be Alf Robbins' seat.
2% swing.
Boswell, Sir Hamilton holds it for Labour.
2% swing there.
Islington East, Eric Fletcher, the Minister without portfolio, holds this one pretty comfortably.
2.5% swing.
Leeds Northwest, Sir Donald Cabry, former Vice Chairman of the Conservative Party.
4% swing, just the average for Leeds.
Cleveland, this is one that Labour took off the Conservatives in 1964. It's a rerun. Wilf Proudfoot trying to get it back, but he falls way behind.
Very big swing there, 6%.
Aldershot, military territory, and Sir Eric Errington holds it for the Conservatives.
3.5% swing. Liberal hold their vote at nearly 20%.
Another one up in Scotland, Stirling and Falkirk Burroughs, Malcolm Macpherson.
3.5% swing.
He's held this seat for 17 years. Southend West, Paul Channon, who was only 23 when he first became an MP, he holds this one.
3.5% swing. The other seat in Southend was only just held by the Conservatives.
Caerphilly is obviously a safe Labour seat. Ness Edwards, who didn't have a job in this government, but did under Mr. Attlee, Lord Attlee, who now is. He holds this one.
2% swing.
Kirkcuddy Burroughs, Harry Gurley holds this.
Low swing, less than 1%.
Newcastle on Tyne West. This is held for Labour. I think it's a new member.
4.5% swing there.
Wanstead and Woodford used to be Sir Winston Churchill's seat. Patrick Jenkin held it in the last Parliament, made quite an impression on the back benches, and in fact is already a front bench spokesman.
Labour gets second place from the Liberals there.
Flintshire East and Mrs. Irene White, another member of the government, back with an increased majority.
4.5% swing.
Mrs. Irene White, Under Secretary at the Colonial Office. Then Esher, Sir William Robson Brown, good commuter territory, solid for the Conservatives.
1.5% swing.
They get 17,000 or more in this constituency. Another junior minister, Winsbury, John Stonehouse.
5% swing.
Parliamentary Secretary of the Ministry of Aviation. He holds it for Labour.
Another big West Midlands swing there.
Well, I've just had the newspapers dumped on the desk. I opened the very top one, which is the Sun, and the Sun says, what a relief it's over. It seems to have been with us for months. In fact, it has, 17 months, the longest election campaign in our history. No one, everyone, politicians included, is a bit politics drunk. I think there's only one man who's never politics drunk. That's Robert McKensie.
Well, he might be surprised if we're going to stay on another hour. Let's look at some of the Tory casualties, some of the better-known ones. We lost Henry Brooke at Hampstead, for example. First time Labour's ever got Hampstead. Not even in 45 did they manage it. But Brooke suffered a 4.3% swing against him and is now out of Parliament. Charles Curran went down at Uxbridge to a rather small swing against him, but this well-known journalist will not be, for the time being at least, in Parliament. Then Dame Patricia Hornsby-Smith, out at Chislehurst. There was a day when people thought she might be, as it were, the Barbara Castle of the Conservative Party, but not quite so much to the fore in recent years, still a lively backbencher until her defeat now. Peter Emery is out at Reading. Now, this was inevitable if there was any swing at all to Labour. It only took a swing of 1 in every 10,000 to put him out, and that occurred, and he's out now of Parliament. Julian Amery, out at Preston North, to a sort of average swing of 3% against him there. a very colourful right-wing figure who will now be outside Parliament for the time being at least. Peter Griffiths, perhaps the most controversial figure to emerge in the last election when he won at Smethick, this time was put out by a huge swing of 8.4%. It may be that the people of Smethick were unhappy about the controversy that surrounded his last election. Then Anthony Courtney, out at Harrow East, again a figure much in the news in the last few weeks before the campaign. Humphrey Barclay, out at Lancaster, perhaps the most liberal figure on the Conservative backbenches. It wasn't the question of Liberals going down, especially because the right wing of the party, as we saw a moment ago, suffered probably just as many casualties. Then Christopher Chataway, out at Lewisham. Again, one of the young hopefuls of the party. It'll be very hard indeed to think that he will not be in back again quite soon, since the party will be having to draw upon the Chataway generation if it's going to re-establish a leadership which has now been badly shaken in the defeats that have occurred at this time. It's important to keep in mind, I think, we'll back on that perhaps in a moment.